And we're on, mate. Jack Bauerle, how you doing, buddy?
Great, Brett. Good to see you and hear you.
Yeah, this has been a long time coming. So thanks for doing this. I appreciate it. I texted you the other day. I said, Jack, I cannot live the rest of my life without getting a Jack Bauerle podcast. I got to get it down, buddy.
Well, we talked enough for a long time. We so it's
Yeah,
nothing. It's not like we're not used to doing it, but I
yeah.
remember seeing you for the first time in Sydney, and
Mm,
uh, and then I so I saw you on both ends of the spectrum as a coach and also an
hmm.
athlete. So
Yeah, yeah.
and
We had a long
respected you
relationship.
in both.
Yeah, yeah. I guess for me, there's nobody that I enjoyed spending the time on the deck more as a competitor because you always treated me with the ultimate respect. But I loved the fact that every time I saw you, you just had a great story. That's what I loved about it. You just had the best stories.
Yeah, I always had a few. Uh,
Yeah,
things just a lot of things just seem to happen to me. Otherwise,
yeah.
either that or I was just paying attention to things.
Yeah. Now listen, Eddie Reese has been getting a lot of attention lately, just
Yeah,
retired, and Eddie is going to go down as one of the greatest of all time and
yeah,
should do. But I don't think enough people put you in the same vein as they should. Jack Bauerle is to me is like an ultimate American living legend. Like
uh,
the track record you had at Georgia is just unparalleled, mate.
thanks. It was quite a journey, as they say. I hate using that all the time because everyone's involved in one. But when we started out, I'll never forget, Brett. I got the job in '79. I was
Mm,
27 years old, and we beat Brenau College. It was a women's college at that time up in Gainesville, Georgia, about a 15-minute drive. And the women were so excited they threw me in. And I thought to myself, that's pretty neat, but I think we got a really long way to go.
yeah.
And it took a while, but there are some things we're proud of. And I think sometimes we go a little bit unnoticed. As you know, there's some great programs, Auburn being one that we had the big rivalry with for years
Yep.
and years. Texas, when I got started, it was Texas, Stanford, and Florida, basically.
Mm,
And but the one thing that we did, I think, is almost non-paralleled by
mm,
any program was for 18 years we were with our women's team. Now it's not like the men's team weren't doing nothing either. They were,
right.
we've been top three, top four.
Mm,
Um, we were basically a perennial top 10, and for years a lot of times in the top six. So, but two things that we did, if I could toot our horn, and this is a tribute to the kids, the athletes, because on the women's team we were either first or second for 15 out of 18 years.
wow.
And we won seven, second eight times. You remember those the most, sadly.
Mm,
But uh, so 18 years. And then we lost our first dual meet here, Brett, in 1995. The men beat Florida, the women lost to Florida.
mm,
And the women did not lose again until 2018. So
wow.
I'm sorry, 2017. So they went 22 years without losing a home meet.
Wow.
And as you know, in the SEC, and we always brought Cal in or Stanford or Texas,
Yeah.
every year.
Mm.
It's not like it was an easy schedule.
Yeah, no, no, not at all. I mean, the run you had is, like I said, when people look at it, it is unparalleled. It's just incredible the work that you did there, and I'm a massive fan, and I'm the type of guy that's like, we need to be talking about Jack Bauerle a lot more than we do, and so I didn't want
Uh,
this to disappear. I wanted this to go down in history. I wanted to record some of this. But tell me this,
Thanks,
Jack, why'd you take the job at Georgia in the beginning? How'd you end up taking that one?
Brett. I was an accidental tourist. I was here as a grad assistant,
Mm,
and Coach Dooley, I helped the men and the women's team at that time. And then Coach came to me and offered me the grand total of $8,000. And I took the women's team, and that was 1979. So I ended up coaching the women for 43 years, and
wow.
I received the men's job in 83. So I had both programs since 83, and we were at the bottom of the barrel. So, and as you never had the chance to see it, but we were in probably the worst facility in the SEC.
Mm,
So, and that changed in 1995, not too long after you guys got yours at Auburn. I think that was 91 or 2, if I remember.
Right.
But anyhow, coach entrusted me, and he, at 27 years old with no head coaching experience, and I went to work, and I was smart enough the very first year, Brett, to know that I knew nothing. So I talked to Dick Shoulberg, and I grew up about 10 minutes from Germantown Academy outside of Philadelphia, and I knew Dick, and I asked if I could come up, and I spent 2 summers with him. And this is what I hope young coaches will always remember. It was virtually for free. I think Dick gave me a camera one summer, and maybe $600 at the end of another summer. And, but I learned a lot about coaching, not so much about the actual training. I watched him incorporate different things into a practice that looked the same to someone that was standing there from the outside. But then he had all these little nuances of someone. You do this, you do this part like this. And he knew how to individualize. And that was a really important thing.
That's really interesting point that you say there, Jack, because a lot of people, when we're talking about coaches and classifying them, we think that they just write the best programs, and it's not the case. I've been on deck with Dave Durden, been on deck with Bob Bowman, Eddie Reese, some of the greatest coaches that are around now. And it's not that I'm not impressed. It's just that I see what I see. It's swimming up and down the pool, but the workout is the workout. But it's the way these guys deliver it, and the way that, like you said, it's nuanced, and the way that you did it for so many years. It's the thing that separates the good from the great, isn't it?
I think so. And it's it's a people thing. And you have to remember, when you're saying something, everyone hears a little bit something different. Right. And but also at times, I'll just give you, and Eddie was a good part of my influence too, as Bob was. Bob, I'll tell you a couple of stories if you can remind me of one, but certainly a couple with 3 breaststrokers. I have to tell you that one. But the first thing comes to mind in 2016. Bob's program and mine are so similar, and it was reason why, as you know, Chase and Schmitty were, I wouldn't say hand delivered, but pretty much hand delivered to the University of Georgia, because he entrusted them to me and our program, right? Because it was very similar. After Olympic trials in 2016, we went our separate ways. We were home for about 7 or 8 days, and then we accumulated down in San Antonio for our training camp. Bob and I decided, we talked on the phone. We said, we'll put the kids together for a lot of it, especially in the beginning, the first week and a half or 2. And we had this big group and a few other visitors from, kids that didn't have their own coaches. And we looked at each other's workout that we both rode on the plane, and literally it was a 200-yard difference. And that was, he had 100 more kick and pull that I had. That was it.
Wow.
And so we sort of thought the same in that way. And, but I think being around Shoulberg was really an eye opener, because everyone thought he just pounded, and which he did. He did some amazing things, but there were other kids in there that did different things too.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, this is in 2021. You're always challenged as a coach, Brett. It's amazing. I had Cortis, just one of the greatest kids. I had Nic Fink and Andrew Wilson. Cortis just missed it. When he came back to train with me, he couldn't finish our warm up. He was so out of shape, and he almost made it. If he had about a month or 2, we would have had all 3 of them on. Wow. But Andrew Wilson had to go lowest yardage that I would ever give anybody for 6 weeks. Nic Fink rested him almost like a 200, middle distance kid. And then Cortis, I just had to make sure, I just had to treat him with kid gloves. But those last 3 or 4 weeks, even 2 months before, those guys, even in the breaststroke group, couldn't train the same. And that's what you have to do at a certain point. You have to keep it together as long as you can, because you have that competitiveness. You always want to go head-to-head stuff in practice. But at the same point in time, everyone needs to do what they do best.
Yeah. Another thing that really impressed me about your program at Georgia is you had a staff of people that stayed with you for many years, loyal, and you just had it clicking. It seemed like everybody knew their role. They understood that Jack was in charge and the boss, but you were respectful with everybody, giving everybody, like, how did you do it, Jack? How do you manage that where you have a staff that is just loyal to you for that long?
They were incredible. I look back in that first staff, Brett, that we won in '99. Carroll was with me, who's at Texas, obviously. Right. Steve Bultman was with me for a couple of years at that time.
Yeah.
And, Harvey, who was with me 30 plus years. And then my diving coach was with me for 30. Wow. And Dan.
Yeah.
I don't know how that happened. I think we sort of enjoyed each other. And I sort of wanted coaches here that I thought I would like to see every day. And I pretty much recruited the same way. I always felt like I had to have a connection with the athlete. And, when I went to their homes or when they came in for an official visit, you can get a feel for how they are. And you go, okay, this is the kind of kid I really like. And did the same thing with coaches. And, we did a lot of stuff outside of whether it was just going out to lunch, was going to dinner, whether it was for me, doing a little hunting, anything. But we ended up, it's a lot of time spent together, and you become closer and closer because you go through some bad and you go through some good. And the biggest thing I always looked at, and what people, I think, need to always look at when they're hiring anybody, I'm not saying they weren't knowledgeable. Steve Bultman knew much more than I did when I got him as an assistant coach. Alex Braunfeld was an assistant here too. And Jerry Champer, Brian Smith, all these guys, they lasted forever. But the biggest thing when I was hiring, especially the young coaches, I didn't care about knowledge. I cared about if they had a sense of loyalty, because that supersedes any characteristic that an assistant coach could have. So that was the thought. And when I met Carol, she wanted to be here. She was relentless of bothering me. We talk about it all the time. She just wanted to be here. And I thought, you know what? She wants to be here so badly, she's going to make it work. And
it must be nice to see Carol and others like that who have come through and they're doing such a fantastic job now, eh?
Yeah. I mean, Carol's remarkable. I mean, they're 3 times, second, and they're banging the door, and I'd be stunned if they don't win the one really soon.
Yeah.
Steve Bultman, what he did certainly down in at A&M. Harvey probably could have gone to a lot of places, but he was comfortable here in his spot, and he enjoyed his role here immensely. And Jerry Champer was pretty much responsible for all the great butterflyers. He did a lot with all the flyers. Brian Smith, all the kids, worked closely with Smoliga and a few others. I mean, we were spread around, and I think that basically when you have an assistant coach, when you hire him, you better trust them, and you better give them some autonomy. Otherwise, I don't think it works at all. Yeah, I think that's the best thing. And they have to earn that spot, but when they earn that, it's relaxing, because I felt like I could always go away for a recruiting trip and everything would be in hand.
Right. You've mentioned this a couple of times in terms of relationships. I think you and Eddie are the 2 greatest at this. There isn't a swimmer that doesn't love you. You've been in this program for over 40 years, and you go to weddings, you go to, all of it. It's you're not just the swim coach. You're the guy that's in their life as well. And Eddie's the same way.
Yep.
How did you figure that out early? Is it just always in you, or did you have to figure that out?
I think Brett, sort of funny. Someone asked me this the other day, actually an academic person here. We were at a function together and on campus, and because he asked me how I'm so intertwined with the faculty also.
Right.
And I think it was pretty much my father and my mother. They literally enjoyed anyone, and I think we just learned by watching some of the osmosis when we're growing up. But and it's a neat thing what happens. When I had the retirement dinner, we had a pretty big celebration here. Last April, and it was the athletic department. We invited 1,000 people came, and we finally And so we probably had bred almost 350 former athletes that have came starting from the 79 team.
Wow.
And you talk about fun. But whatever I gave them, they gave as much back. That's for sure. And I think the kids probably just had a sense that I enjoyed them as much as, hopefully they enjoyed me. There were some days where they couldn't stand me, of course, but some days you have to get blood out of rock. And but at any rate, just always enjoyed the people part. And Eddie and I are very much the same in that area.
Yeah.
And then he and I actually, I'll never forget when we were a couple times, whether it happened in Budapest in 17 and also in 2008, they came to us, USA Swim, and said, hey, great news. You guys have your own room. You don't have to, we're not doubling up. And I said, and Eddie goes, that's okay. We don't need our own room. We had more fun being in the same room together.
Yeah.
We had a good time.
I can tell that about you guys. Just love being around each other. A couple of other things I've always admired about you. I don't know if I've told you this, but I loved your energy all the time. Like you're always even keeled. I mean, you're always smiling. You're always happy in the sense. I mean, you're firm, and I'm sure there are times where you're strict as well.
Mm-hmm.
But like you're even keeled in that sense. Like every time I saw you, it was you're always on the same wavelength. It was always you were here. You were never like too high, never too low. Like things didn't depress you. How did you manage all that over the course of such a long period of time, especially going through season after season? I mean, at Georgia, you guys are going from short course championship straight into long course. You're traveling the world, going to the Olympic Games and World Championships. How did you manage all that?
I don't know. I know one thing. I got a pretty good level of energy from my mom and dad. My dad worked at his job until he was 86 years old, 2 months before he passed away.
Wow.
But yeah, I think I was really lucky. I know this sounds really sappy, but I just loved what I was doing because it brought me around people that I liked every day. My energy came from other people, not from within myself, I think. And I, that's why, I was always happy to surround myself with athletes that I loved coaching. And as you know, and you coach, you know how it is. There are some days that are hard, and that's an understatement.
Yeah.
And then you go through some meets that you come back and you look in the mirror and you go, good God, how can I do this? But and then you look in the mirror and again you say, well, I got about 60 kids depending on doing this correctly. But I think I was really fortunate. I just enjoyed what the heck I was doing, and as I said, I just got the positive energy that I had and tried to exude was pretty much given to me from everyone I met. I always enjoyed seeing you. I always respected you. You and I had a great relationship when you were at Auburn, and I just and it started for me just respecting as whether I was a foe or not. I mean, watching you race. I mean, it started with you as an athlete,
right?
And I think I watch young coaches, and I hope they do that. They have to appreciate what's around them too, other coaches, but also the other athletes. And in a lot of cases, Brett, especially if you're an American coach, you end up coaching a lot of kids that you recruited that didn't come too. And I'd be quite frank, I'm as proud of some of the relationships I have with kids that never stepped a toe at the University of Georgia.
Right. Yeah.
And there's a reason I wanted them and missed them, but sometimes kids go to other schools too.
Yeah, Eddie gave me a great piece of advice once. He said, Brett, how many kids do you think I recruit a year? He's like, and I said, I'm 30 to 40. He's like, how many kids do you think I get? He's like 6 to 8. He's like, yeah. So I hear no more than I hear yes. So get used to it.
More. Yeah, and some of them break your heart. I have a couple of them, I mean, literally a couple of them, especially when we got started. Yeah. I have one young lady who had a legacy at North Carolina. I'll say her name, Amy Pless. And Rich DeSalle knows her well. Frank Comfort coached her. And I know it was sort of a pipe dream trying to get her, but she really loved it here. We had a great mix with her. And I think she would have saved us almost 5 years, if you know what I mean. And she was that kind of kid, and she was wonderful. And she had a wonderful career there. She made a great decision going there too. And, but
the ones you miss, they break your heart, don't they?
Oh, good gosh! It's
Caleb Dressel's still breaking my heart.
it's unbelievable. I mean,
Yeah.
it's crushing, you know. And
Yeah.
but I tell you what, I learned a lesson when I was being recruited. There's a coach in a school that remained nameless. It was in the Big Ten. It was a heck of a good school. And they had offered me a full, and I had one of my best friends was going there, and they called, and I said, you know, Coach, I just took a trip to Georgia, and I decided on the University of Georgia, and there was no response, and I went, oh boy. And I remember looking in the mirror. I was in the bathroom, and we had to take the phone around back in those days for privacy, right? And go into a room, and I was already sweating. You know, you're 18 years old. And I'll never forget that coach said to me, son, I'm going to tell you something. You just made the biggest mistake of your entire life. And he hung up. And that was it. And, you know, I remember how that felt as an athlete. And no matter how disappointed I was as a coach, I always make sure I wished him luck and told him they're going to do great. And I'll see him on the deck.
Yeah. Better for the long run, isn't it? I learned that young, you know, as a young head coach too. Better for the long run. You never know when you're going to see him again, like you said. Hey, what about this? You know, Herbie Behm has just taken over as the head coach at ASU. Young guy, fantastic, phenomenal, smart, intelligent. He knows what he's doing, but he's now the head. He's now the top dog. So, what kind of advice would you have for someone like him?
Hold on to your seat. You hadn't seen the likes of this. You know, Brett, it changes fast when you're a head coach, and you also better get ready for going to some absolutely inane meetings that will be compulsive.
Everyone loves you as an assistant, don't they, Jack?
Yeah, it's a piece of cake. I'll tell you what. I've had a lot of doctor's appointments, you know, during some of those meetings, but oh gosh, Brett, we had a great coach here, Coach McGill, is really considered the father of collegiate tennis. My middle son is named for him, but we played tennis virtually every week. He played until he was 90 plus, and he was the winningest coach in collegiate tennis when he retired. But he would call and he goes, Jack, I said, hey Dan, how you doing? He said, can you play tennis tomorrow at 8:30? And I said, absolutely. And no matter what I had, I must admit, I can say it now that I'm not in the athletic department anymore. I must have missed 30 staff meetings over the years. But I knew one thing: I was never going to miss a chance of being with him on a tennis court.
Yeah. Actually, that's a good piece of advice for Herbie. You know, like I think one of the things I learned too is you get pulled in a lot of directions, and there's a lot of stuff on your plate. And if I'm going to take anything from you and the way you look at the health and your mental health, your physical health, you looked after yourself, and you made that a priority as well, of having that balance. As hard as it is, as much as is going on, you never looked tired, you never looked unhealthy, you never looked like you were broken mentally. You helped looked like you had it together. And I think the way that you manage that by having relationships and making sure that those things were important, I think that really helped with your longevity, right?
I think so too. And you have to take care of yourself because, and you have to manage it. There are times where you don't want to do a thing. You have to get on a schedule. But I think if I could have probably if I had a talk with Herbie, I think I would say, make sure you find yourself associated with people other than the athletic people. You know, I think it's important to have yourself intertwined with, you know, when you're at a university, whether it's Auburn, whether it's Georgia, whoever, there are so many people there that are so amazing in their fields. And sometimes it's subtle that, as you probably know, the most amazing people say nothing about who they are and what they are. And it's just an absolute joy to be associated with them in some ways. And, you know, that's a part I'm most proud of here, is just being part of organizations that are on campus with people that I absolutely admire. And quite frankly, the best honor our president ever bestowed on me was 2 years ago when he allowed me to do a commencement speech here. And that's when I thought things went full cycle. And as you probably know, this is even better. Allison Schmidt's going to do our commencement speech this spring.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And
That's awesome.
I mean, I tell you, talk about being a proud papa. What a
Yeah.
great thing. It's
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
she
Huge
yeah.
accomplish honor. Yeah. That's cool.
But I think for him just to be, make sure you get yourself out there. Don't go home all the time. Eat lunch outside where people see it, because he's in a community that loves swimming too,
Hmm.
and then also treat your he did a great job with his kids this year,
He
and I
did.
know
Yeah.
and I know Bob touted him highly every time he and I
Right.
spoke, and
Right.
so he'll do a great job. It's going to be tough at first because Bob leaving is certainly you know a blow. But
Yeah.
he'll find his way. He'll find a way he wants to do it, and he's and like we just talked about, Brett. It's really important that he gets some really good people around him that he
Right.
trusts.
Right. Let's talk swimming just for a sec.
Okay.
Obviously, the success you had for many years, there's things that you just believed in, and there was things that were just going to always be in your program, and there's things that you just fell back on for success. So, what are those pillars? Maybe what are the things that you just totally believed in that you needed to have in your program?
Well, there was a gigantic emphasis on.
Say that again. Oh, hang on a sec.
Okay, here we go. Well, I think, as you probably know, there was a great emphasis on long course here,
Mm-hmm.
and
Right.
and and that started throughout or began, when we came in September. We did a lot of long course early. As you know, there's a pressure to be doing as much short course as you possibly can be after Christmas.
Yep.
Uh, but we made sure certain people, especially the ones with aspirations of making on the team, got at least 30% long course in, even in the middle of January and February. And so that was a big part. That was sort of a pillar of
Mm-hmm.
our program, as you said, and there was just a gigantic emphasis on making a national team. And because some of those kids, I mean, we know some of the ones like Olivia, when she came in, she was highly touted.
Mm-hmm.
Chase was too. People forget Chase, though. Before he came, he rested and shaved in December when he came in, because he started in January with us.
Mm.
He went 3:45. He ended up going 3:33. And it's not like some of those kids, they were great. They came in really fast, but they got faster.
Yeah. Sure.
And Nic Fink, I mean, good gosh. I mean, look at him now.
Oh yeah.
I was pleasure to coach him for 10 years, and he's in great hands with Rhodey right now too. And he was with Michael Norman, one of my formers. And, it was a process. And I think some of the athletes have to remember, and here's a perfect example. Nic Fink is now, arguably, he's got a shot to win a gold in the 100 breaststroke.
Yeah.
He set millions of short course records. And when he came in here, he was, he wasn't that highly touted. He went 102 high, but that was after he got here and went to a junior meet,
Yeah.
like down in Peru, I think. And so he was pretty much like a 103 plus high breaststroker, and 218, 219, 200.
He was Jack, and I'll tell you what, I've got a Nic Fink story, and I'll back you up on this. He wasn't that highly touted.
No.
He came on a recruiting trip to Auburn, and what I did occasionally was I'd bring him into my office and have a one-on-one with him.
Yep.
So I remember this distinctly. So Nic Fink comes into my office, sits down in front of me, and we kind of just going through things, and I'm asking him questions, and I say, Nick, what's your goals in swimming? I don't really have any. I said, well, what do you want to do in college? How you want to progress? If I was just asking him basic stuff, he's like,
yeah,
no, haven't really thought about it. Well, do you want to be an NCAA champion? Do you want to go to the Olympics? I don't know. Hadn't put too much thought into that. So he's saying these things to me, right? And so at the end of it, I go back to my assistant coaches. I said, listen, this guy's got no ambition, no goals. Let's stop recruiting him.
Thanks. Well, I got to tell you, this is another big story. Well, I'm glad he was like that with you. The night I recruited him, I had, how percentages work. We work on 9.9, right?
Yeah.
And we're always trying to get the best, as much money as we possibly can out of what we have. And it's hard. And, it's the worst thing I think the worst thing about college swimming is the fact that we're not on a head count. That it's just nuts that we are. Now football coaches now know what it's like that we were in negotiations all our lives. But he came in. I had about 40% scholarship set for him, and he knows this story now. I didn't tell him until about 3 or 4 years ago. And he goes, and we were playing basketball over at Carol's house, and we played over, and nice full court there. And he was in bare feet, and he went up and dunked it. He dunked it with 2 hands backward. Wow. And I went, well, that's a 75%.
Yeah.
And then we sat down like you did on that Saturday morning. I said, Nick, good news. I got at least a 75%, maybe more scholarship for you.
You can dunk a basketball like that. You're an athlete. Yeah.
I think I can work with that. One of my coaches, who shall remain nameless, I'll never forget, the first month they were watching Nick on a kick set. And they said, Jack, I don't know if he's going to make it. I go, what do you mean? He said, he can't kick under 2 minutes for a long course. I said, let's just give him a little bit of time, half a year here. I think he'll be all right. And
Nic Fink goes on to be a 4-time SEC champion in a row. Never lost an SEC championship. Goes on and win NCAA title. Goes on to win Olympic gold medal. It's like, oh my God!
And then he keeps getting faster and faster and faster.
Yeah.
His dad was an executive director of the NBA, also.
Oh wow!
Yeah, okay. Really neat man, really neat family, and Nick carried here. He got an NCAA postgraduate scholarship, had a 3.8 in engineering, also.
Yeah, it's funny too. We missed on Nick, but Nick just looked right at home at Georgia. He just looked like a Georgia Bulldog. You made him into a Georgia boy, a Georgia man. So like sometimes it just fits. It's like they end up in the right spot, don't they?
They do. I think so. And you had some in yours too, and we've had some. Nick was one of those kids. I felt when he came, I go, okay, and I almost sensed that he wanted to come, and but it worked out for him and us, But more importantly for him, I think he is an amazing guy, and he's married to an amazing young lady, and Melanie Margalis too.
Oh yeah, another tough woman there, right there.
Oh, she was a joy.
Yeah,
and she talk about getting better and better and better. I mean, geez Louise. Walking in and making up a workout for Mel was fun. You could pretty much make it anything as hard as you possibly can, and she would just take a bite out of it.
Isn't that great? There's always that saying, or that graph of like you've got your 20% that come in and just going to cause all sorts of trouble for you, and then you've got the kids in the middle that are just going to come in and do what you tell them to do, and then you got the ones that are going to go above and beyond. The small percentage. But how did you deal with each of those groups? How did you deal with the ones that just could never figure it out, like the ones that just frustrate you all the time? How'd you deal with them?
Well, I had definitely had talks with them, but I think the hardest thing you have to handle is don't forget about them, because there are kids that get off to horrendous starts. One of whom, she'll know if she sees this, she'll know I'm talking about her. But she came to us as a full scholarship athlete out of Pennsylvania, and she was an absolute pain in the neck for 2 years. And sort of came down on her a little bit back, when you could get their attention, and talk to her mom and dad about it, and just say, listen, it's coming up. This is put up or shut up time. She ended up as a captain. She ended up with a 3.7, I think, in finance. And she ended up being, even though she was a 400 IMer, she finaled in 2016. She was put on a 200 free relay, and she had no right being on there. And she goes 21.9, and we got second on a relay. We almost didn't even swim because we weren't any good. And we won the NCAA championship. And she was as important as, or more than anybody on that team. And the ones that I really welcome, Brett, I think this is a story for another time, but I can't tell you how many walk-ons have had gigantic impacts here.
Right. Yeah.
And some of those kids, you go in and they just wanted to be here so badly. They never made you rich by with points at NCAAs, but a lot of them worked their way into a conference, being conference scorers, and just being part of a team because they come in. And I always like the ones that are a little bold and sort of, just put themselves out there, where they get here on campus and they want to have a meeting with you. And I said, you know what, that's good. And, you give them time, whether they're, I had a boy that was a 152, 200 butterfly, and I gave him a spot. He's working on Wall Street now. And, he went 142.8. And,
Wow.
and I'll tell you what, I hope he hears this. If he went 142.8, there's a lot of guys who can go 142.8 because, he just worked. And I think, so I had to make sure either it was me as much as at the time as I possibly could, or in the coach got with everybody and just made sure everybody had aspirations for being there, and it was not just a place to be. And but you said, there's always, you like to have a group like Haley Flickinger, Nic Fink, Chase, Jay Little, and Gunner. I mean, all the guys, Carolyn Joyce, Mary DeSenza.
Yeah.
I mean, all these, Martin Grosky. I can just go up and down. Sebastian Rule.
You better be careful here, Jack. Don't get yourself in trouble. You've had a lot of superstars come through.
Yeah.
So you better
name
them all.
Kristy Kowal and Courtney Shealy too, and I'm going to get Maritza. But I better stop. But I mean, all those people. Yeah. You have to take care of them because their aspirations are different.
Right.
And I think if anyone thinks they're treated the same, they're not. They're treated fairly, but they get certainly a lot more attention in a way that's subtle because they end up doing more. A lot of them do an extra practice, where other kids never see. But, you have to give them everything that they deserve. And I think, and every kid deserves a lot. Once you bring them in here, that's your responsibility to coach them all.
It is. Yeah, it is. Let me ask you this in terms of building a championship team. They're all trying to figure it out, Jack. Everybody wants one.
Yeah.
Seems like Todd and Virginia are the ones that have figured it out the most recently. How do you build a championship team? Are there any secrets to that, or you tell us, how do you do it?
Well, you were part of more than a few, and so it's a process, and a lot of it is after that first one that you experience. The athletes are the ones that can help you the most.
Mm-hmm.
And the coach gets a lot of credit after that. But I got to tell you something. I remember in '99 we won, and then 2000 when I had Courtney Shealy and Kristy Kowal and as captains, I had 2 meetings that entire year, and that was it. Most of that was just tell them where the bus was going to be. I didn't have to do anything. They took over that team. And the year after I had some great ones too with, Maritza was part of that in 2005. It's just one thing led to another. And I think after you establish that winning part of things, that's when you can do a little bit less coaching, hopefully, and more about just letting them steer the boat a lot more too. But it's hard to get
I've heard Dave Durden say that at Cal too. You establish the right people, and then it's led by them.
Yes, it is, and you have to be careful with, because you, as a coach, you think you're important to them, but at some point in time, they're at their best without you at that point. And I'll never forget, we had a relay that went up, and this relay was pretty good. This went 308 or 309 back in 10 years ago. 11 years ago, 400 free relay. And one of my coaches said, "Hey, Jack, you got to go up there and talk to him." And I remember looking at him, I said, look at the 4 that are standing there. I go, "So what are you going to tell them?" That, and I said, "Look at them. They're ready to tear somebody's eyes out." So there are times, and that is the beauty of coaching, when you get to that point where you don't have to coach.
Yeah, exactly. What about this? Let's look at the world scene a little bit. Look, America's, to me, is always going to be number one. No one's really proven that we're going to knock them off at any Olympics just yet. So, but the world is catching up.
Yep.
and the world's getting smaller. Social media,
Yep.
even these things, podcasts where
Yep.
the top coaches are talking. So you've been to China too, and China has made a resurgence, and it seems like they're doing things the right way.
Yep.
So, like, how afraid of the rest of the world do you think America needs to be?
I think very afraid. And I think we have to realize that everyone's coming at us. And, like when you were at your peak over there swimming, it was pretty much when we were in Sydney, it was us versus you guys.
Yeah. Right.
And there were sporadic great swims, but it wasn't quite as dominant as like Australia was and the United States was.
Mm-hmm.
It's getting spread out really evenly. And I think we have to be really cognizant of the fact that people are coming after us, but they always did, but fast swimming is going on everywhere. It's starting to spread out. It's sort of like what happened. Heck, you can take it to another sport. You can take it in basketball. It's happened in basketball too, Brett. And, I think they're good coaches. I think that everybody now beg, borrows, and steals a lot more than they used to.
Yeah.
And we used to have to know somebody like, I got my information from John Urbanchuk, Eddie Reese, Frank Bush. Those are the guys I trusted the most. And those are the ones who probably had the biggest impact, and Dick Shoulberg on my program. And I think everybody's getting all the information that they need. And I think people now understand what it takes to swim fast too.
Yeah. Just quickly on China again, I know you've
Yep.
been over there a couple of times, and I'm interested in checking it out. I think it's always been the big bad country where we don't know much about it. They're doing everything in the shadows, but haven't been there and seen it. What are they doing right? What are the because China's come on, man, haven't they?
Yeah, and they do it correctly. They have an amazing feeder system.
Right.
It's just they have kids that are learning how to swim, and they're in there 2 hours a day. And then I watched when I was over there this past summer. I watched the divers, and what they're completely dominant in the divers. I saw about 40 kids that were, probably 10 and under, going off doing, back dives and perfect 1.5s off of like 3 meter and 5 meter platforms. And they didn't waste time. They walked up and you did it and you did it. You didn't see any of these kids. There was no cajoling like, oh, don't worry, you'll be fine. You either go off or you don't, Yeah. It's just different. And, but, I think people have to realize too, and you traveled enough, people are people and they're wonderful everywhere.
Yeah.
And I will say this in the East, and it reminds me of the United States. This is going to go over like a lead balloon, but in the 60s and 70s, if you're a guest there, you are treated like a king. And it doesn't matter if you're in a profession that you do well. It doesn't matter if you're a swim coach, a teacher, or CEO. You're treated pretty much the same. And as a guest, the amount of respect they have for you is off the map, and the manners are something to enjoy for sure.
Right.
And it's always a good experience. It's a good experience to visit any country. It's just they're all different, but in the end, you can always tell they're just good, fun people.
Yeah. How much have you kind of wanted to stay involved in swimming since your retirement? You obviously, it sounds like you're still in it a fair bit. So you still comfortable doing that?
Yeah, I feel comfortable doing what I'm doing and no more. So I think I can say it this way. I don't want to worry about performance anymore.
Yeah.
That's the easiest way.
What about this, Jack? I mean, you've got so much knowledge and information, and I'm loving that you're talking here, because I'm glad we're getting this for future generations to listen to. But are you writing a book? Are you doing something where you're getting something a little bit more solid down?
Yes. The plans are to start on a book in September, and
great.
There's just so many ways to go about it. I don't know if I need to do 2, because I have this entire other life outside of swimming. And but it's all intertwined, because swimming was a part of my life since I was a little kid. So and 80% of the things that happened were because of swimming. So I'm getting ready to put that in, because I do have some stories that I think that are important that can help people and also entertain them. I mean,
Yeah.
I've been around some pretty amazing people that were pretty darn entertaining, and I've been in situations where I never would have dreamed of when I was a young swimmer growing up outside of Philadelphia.
Oh yeah, no, you're the best storyteller. I love listening to your stories. They're awesome.
Yeah.
What else was I going to say here? How'd you feel about George? You were the head for so many years. Didn't they split the program? How'd you feel about that?
I feel good about it. I think it's right now. I think the kids. I think that the times have changed in a way. I think socially and everything else. I think they need more person-to-person time.
Yes.
And I think for those coaches, I think it's really difficult now to be looking over two and giving the recruiting the time that you want, especially if you have a family. And
yep.
You want people to have family values. It's not like you have to have kids, but you have to have good family values. And I think, and you have to be, and you're not going to be happy as a coach unless your family's happy either. And your kids and your spouse and everybody's thriving,
right.
Because as you well know, the first thing you realize when you finish, you go, holy Christmas. I had no idea that was that consuming.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I definitely learned that lesson. And it hits you, but
no, it's unbelievable. It really, it's hard to even imagine. But it's a tribute to the kids and a tribute to the fact that we just sort of liked what the heck we were doing.
Yeah. Well, listen, man, I appreciate this conversation. It's been awesome to catch up with you. I love
you too, right?
It's been too long, but we need to do it again. But yeah, mate, thanks for sharing some stories today.
Yeah, I got a couple that I would love to tell you. It's a lot of pretty neat ones, especially in the beginning of things too. But especially and some Olympic stories that were absolutely incredible because things that happen over there are incredible. But as you said, you're right to the point. People are getting closer, and we're going to have to react to it. And my wish is to make sure our athletes that are so good short course have to turn that over to great long course swimming, and they have to. That has to be a commitment to it because the way some of the times we're getting short course, is they're off the map and
off the map,
and we see some of it long course, but not enough. That's in comparatively speaking to what they're doing short course. And
your approach to this is probably why America was so good for so long. Having this mentality, and we can't get away from that. So I think we lost him there. Oh, it was right on time, but that's it. Jack Bauerle, gone. Don't know if he's coming back. Let's hit pause for 1 second.